Before we get started, if you're enjoying this content, you can do us a favor by subscribing to our YouTube channel and ringing the bell. That'll let the algorithm know that you like this content and it will help us produce more.
If you're looking to grow, don't ignore distribution channels such as other marketplaces.
Welcome to Honest Ecommerce, a podcast dedicated to cutting through the BS and finding actionable advice for online store owners. I'm your host, Chase Clymer, and I believe running a direct-to-consumer brand does not have to be complicated or a guessing game. On this podcast, we interview founders and experts who are putting in the work and creating real results. I also share my own insights from running our top Shopify consultancy, Electric Eye. We cut the fluff in favor of facts to help you grow your e-commerce business. Let's get on with the show. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Honest Ecommerce. I'm your host, Chase Clymer. Today, I'm welcoming to the show the managing director at Deloitte Digital, one of the leaders of the largest commerce practices in North America, Paul Forno. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Real excited to be here.
Yeah, and then just because it's on trend for me, when I do have another Ohio in here, another Buckeye, I just got to shout it out that Ohio is where it's happening.
Yeah, it's amazing, actually, the amount of ties to the history of commerce and all the different connections. Ohio's theme is the heart of it all, but really, if you think about it, we are the commerce heart of it all between the fulfillment, retail, startups that are around in Ohio. You would be amazed.
This wasn't even something we talked about in the pre-show, but let's dive in there. First, maybe let's just give them a little bit of your background and your history there. You've been around, this e-commerce game quite a while, and you've seen a few things.
Yeah, I guess I'm the old guy in e-commerce. So I've been doing digital and web. I worked on some of the first websites back in 94 and 95. And I've been doing e-commerce specifically for the last 20 years. So I've kind of seen this whole arc. And what's funny is I remember in the early 2000s going to talk to retailers, and the way they even thought about e-commerce, it was like, oh, it's just like a plaything off to the side, right? And sometimes they would just talk about it like it was, store number 999, that they would treat it like literally it's like a side business, but it would never become important. And so I've kind of gone through that whole hype cycle to where we've almost, during COVID, it almost went to the other side where everything was going to be e-commerce, but we know it didn't. So it's been very interesting that path to see all the different technologies, all the different permutations of what's happened.
Oh, absolutely. There's been a lot of interesting things that happened just even in the last couple of years with e-commerce, not to mention the last 20 years. So take me back, are there any notable projects that you're allowed to talk about that you'd worked on in kind of e-commerce and kind of the challenges that you had to solve for back then when Shopify didn't exist? None of these like easy plug and play solutions existed.
Yeah, let me give a little bit of background on some of the technology, because even though on the enterprise side, there's a whole history of products. Actually, some of the first commerce packages came out of Germany, Intershop. Intershop is like one of the earliest, mid to late 90s where it started. And little known fact that Intershop was also the start of Demandware. So Demandware merged off of Intershop back about 15 years ago, took the code and made it a SaaS version, right? And in fact, Intershop also, broke off, and then a couple of other major companies have used it internally. So it's historically one of the oldest commerce platforms that's been out there. But, some of the other big players, IBM built, one of the first big Java application servers and WebSphere Commerce. Again, for a long time, some of the largest retailers use them and still use them as their core. It's one of the highest use. And then a couple of other ones. Interestingly, there's a couple of companies, again, going back to this Germany, there's a lot of commerce platforms that have come out of Germany. So Hybris is what SAP bought, right? And again, in the enterprise side, it's probably one of the largest market shares in both B2C and B2B. And so if you go back the last 20 years between Intershop, IBM, Oracle, who bought ATG, again, one of the largest at one point. It's been very cyclical and had been basically worked through some of the technologies. So stepping back, like you talked about one of the challenges, right? We are so spoiled these days that you hit a button and you create an instance, right? I can remember we're working with, in fact, to title again, we're both here in Columbus, Ohio. I was doing some work at a Victoria's Secret back 2006-ish. And they were custom build, but remember, they physically had their servers. And so if they wanted to migrate, they were thinking about migrating to this new platform called Demandware back in the day. You physically had to like go buy the servers. And so we were, somebody was pitching these ideas and to go out, and it was going to take 6 months just to get the servers to be able to just install and build, right? Because of all of at the time, interestingly, Victoria's Secret was like in the top 10 of internet retail sites, relatively speaking. If you look now, it's the, Amazon's, Walmart's, some of the largest retailers up there. But at that time, they were one of the leaders in the space. And so it's just interesting, like to go back where you had to like put in and think about physically getting the hardware and stacking it in. So this whole AWS cloudification and SaaS space just completely changed the game.
Oh yeah, it honestly, it makes everything so much easier. You can, spin up a site, with many of the SaaS solutions there. Shopify specifically, you press a button, you got a site. Is it good? Will it convert? Who knows? But like, you do have a site that's infinitely easier than the almost physical demanding work of doing this back in the day. So are there any other projects that you remember working on historically that kind of bring up some of this history of e-commerce?
Yeah, probably one of the biggest implementations ever that I was part of, and it was one of the biggest commerce implementations of the last 15 years, is if you go back to 2009 and 2010, Target was actually hosted on Amazon. Not just their core commerce, but their fulfillment, their call center. It was completely on Amazon technology. So at the time, Target was way bigger than Amazon, right? It's crazy to think about it now. Amazon's one of the largest companies in the world, and Target's doing great, but Target was better, and they realized, oh crap, these guys are going to be bigger than us, and they're going to be a competitor, so they had to get them off. And so they were negotiating a deal, and we came in, and I had actually had some experience in helping Borders get off of Amazon prior to that, just before they did go away. But in order to do that, it was a massive change. We had at its peak, we had 500 developers working for a couple of years to get all the change into this new platforms, right? And a lot of it is like, again, new. During that time, still there wasn't cloud capabilities, right? Like you were still having the physical, getting the hardware going, being able to stack that, worrying about order management, supply chain integrations, warehouses, and in order to like build all that out, it was just, the scale was just massive. But like, if you think about it, can you imagine Target having a differentiated experience if they hadn't got off of Amazon, right? Or Amazon having all that data on the Target customers. So that was a great experience going through that.
Absolutely. I remember you sharing that with me before, and it's definitely eye-opening, especially back then. These days, it's obvious to us that like you need to own your experience, you need to own your data, but a lot of the sharpest minds at these businesses didn't have that foresight because it wasn't something that was in kind of the zeitgeist yet. You didn't know. Yeah,
in fact, and we didn't do this work. I know they've done a lot of this internally. A lot of these large corporations they can invest to have, custom build some of this work. And so if you look at Target, the way they've executed over the last couple of years, they're one of the best from a delivery perspective, their numbers as far as how they deliver out of their stores is phenomenal. I forget the exact numbers, but somewhere in the neighborhood of 60 to 70% fulfillment happens via stores, which if you go to Target ever, I don't ever see anybody picking right from stores that they can fulfill, and the way they've done that. Whereas, you might go to if you go to some of the grocery stores, like you see Amazon people picking, right? Like all over the place. And so for them to be able to do, buy online, pick up in store, or deliver from store at the rate that they did was just phenomenal.
Yeah, and some of what you're speaking to now is some of the innovations that were thrust upon the market during the pandemic. So, I guess we can naturally just transition into that conversation. You were sharing with me before some numbers, and I'll actually admit that I've been guilty of saying this on this very show about just the rise of the market, the penetration of e-commerce versus the national spend. But I'll let you kind of shine some new light on what's actually going on since things have kind of evolved even since then.
Yeah. So one thing I for sure want to dispel one myth, and I think it's still posted in some places up there. Early in the summer of 2020, you saw things, 10 years of acceleration in e-commerce in a couple months. Well, it's factually not correct. And some of it gets into really just looking at how numbers, taking one number from one source, another number from another source, and merging them together. It really gets into some stuff like that, but they leverage it for a narrative, right? But if you look at the actual numbers, and I always try and reference US Census Bureau, right? Because that is they are the guardians of the retail, and it gets a little complicated, but the big picture was that there was a jump during COVID, as you would expect, on the penetration. And if we just take the total retail, it jumped up to like 16%, 17% of overall retail. And then it fell back to a median closer to around 14%. And that's if you still include gasoline, et cetera. But the net of the pattern was there was a huge jump, but it actually fell back to the mean, meaning it actually is at the same growth potential of what it was before. So if you look at the past 15 years growth trajectory, we're almost exactly back to what the original trajectory was before. So that's an important thing. That, again, it doesn't mean commerce isn't important, right? Like, it just means that each category of different products, they're going to find their natural mean. Like, if you look at like electronics, for example, they have a high distribution of selling online, right? Whereas apparel is only going to hit a certain amount, right? There's certain products that are more apt to be sold online, and over time will hit what the natural mix between online and live shopping. Because for sure, retail and selling has been around for hundreds of thousands of years. They're not going away, right? And so part of what you need to do is figure out what is the unique value that you can drive that will connect with your customer.
Absolutely. And there's something else to that kind of that trend is when you did see that jump in sales, essentially, is what it comes down to during the pandemic. I think that something that a lot of brands, they got used to that growth, the rapid growth, and they didn't, they weren't as prepared for it to go away and weren't as accepting of it. I've talked to numerous merchants where they were like, we're down from last year. Like, what are we doing? And I'm like, that's just what it is. There's nothing you're doing wrong. You're doing everything right. It's just like the market isn't spending online as it was.
Yeah. So I think there's a couple things. There's the natural regression to the mean, which means actually, if you look, many companies have actually done like 2-year look backs, right? Because if you do 2-year look backs, like 65% growth over 2 years is amazing. So if you only have a couple percent this past year, it's not that bad in overall context. But I think the challenge that e-commerce online sellers have to think about is there's other things that are happening now. Obviously, because this combo of challenges right now, one, if you look at inflation, right? The latest stats say inflation in the US is up 8.5% over last year. That's that's the highest in, close to 40 years. So that's going to impact your buying, right? And we do, part of our retail group, we do a lot of research around what those impacts are. And really what you're seeing is this bifurcation, right? We saw this in years gone by, but it's getting worse and worse, meaning actually at their highest end on luxury, they're doing unbelievably well. In fact, they're doing much more. But if you have products at the lower end, right, what you're seeing is both either you're getting pushed to people are on the luxury that are buying like crazy, or at the lowest end of purchasing power is actually decreasing. So if you have a segment down on the the lower end, they don't have as much to spend, especially given the gas impacts and all of these inflations. And so you take that plus the supply chain challenges, plus what Ukraine hit, plus what tried and true being able to access a lot of this first party data or some party data that used to get from because of Apple and on Facebook, it's a massive change, right? And so what that's really exposing are who are the real retailers that know how to connect with their customer and align their product versus who were people who were taking advantage of an arbitrage.
Absolutely. Now, one thing that I think I skimmed over at the beginning because we just dived right into it is kind of let people, what is Deloitte Digital and what do they do? You know what I mean?
Yeah. So Deloitte Digital is, I think you kind of mentioned it, we're one of the largest, if not the largest commerce service provider. We're the largest professional services firm in the world, but Deloitte Digital is one unit within that. And so, we're partners with Salesforce, SAP, Adobe, Shopify, a lot of different partners, some of the largest partners for some of these. And so we have 5 or 6 studios across North America, and we help everything from strategy, design, development to operate, big, large enterprise websites. And, we help right now 5 of the top 10 internet retailers. We can't talk about those names, but like a few of the names that we can share are, we're working with Chipotle, Lululemon, and Casey's stores. And so a lot of brands in the past, I've led, Foot Locker, and that would be the whole, everything from design, order management, implementation of platforms, rolling out and driving out those changes.
So what are some of the challenges that hit brands at that scale? Like enterprise is such a different ball game than a lot of the SMBs that, might be listening to the show.
So the big challenge that you have with lots of large enterprises, one, especially when they have existing business, how do you run your existing business and then, migrate? Like, in the instance of, Foot Locker, when we helped them, they were on 15-year-old technology and they needed to get off of it because it was close to end of life. So how do you help them transition, right, while they're running the business? And so one of the challenges that you necessarily don't have when you're running your own small company is you might have hundreds or thousands of people that you need to coordinate with. And so that whole change management and getting aligned and getting the people, all the things that you need to coordinate, that ends up being one of the biggest changes or differences. It's the people change piece of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Just getting all incentives aligned and even just timing aligned on some of these. Yeah.
And also when you get into, well, hey, we also have another division there that we acquired. They have another different ERP. We have 5 or 6 different back office systems. We have different order management systems. Well, we have to make sure that this is routing to different distribution. And so when you start to get into it, it gets unbelievably complicated. And so to break all that down in a large program, it really takes a lot to kind of break out. And really what we've done is done large scale program agile delivery, right? To be able to do that. So, no longer, and it's been a long time since we've got into this big waterfall approach, right? Really what we get into is kind of a modified hybrid agile where we might prove out some architecture, do some, proof of concept up front, then get into a more quick delivery schedule where we really help people get out. But I can't overemphasize how complicated and, focusing on the change management across all of that and the training needed when you do, prior to going live and going live.
Yeah. And not to mention, brands don't hit that enterprise level scale without having some solid systems in place, and getting those systems to talk to each other and then to talk to new systems as you're solving for the future is a lot of strategic undertaking. Yeah,
absolutely. And what you see too is people get into like what's perfect versus, what's good enough, right? And what we've tried to do as we've gone through this is like, slowly roll out stuff and get into, instead of doing a big bang cut over to, a new program, maybe, find a subsector of their either brand or audience that you can test out without switching everybody over, get all the kinks out, get the training out, and then really rolling all of that stuff out, right? Like it becomes like not as easy. Hey, we can just, quick and change and and the funny part too is you get in a lot of like, when you're dealing with just a couple of owners, how hard sometimes it is just to get them to agree. Well, imagine different countries and global and all the impacts around the world and all the different, priorities of different senior people. And so we get into a lot of that. And that's really what ends up being the tech part ends up being the easiest of everything, of all the stuff, to be honest. It's actually the alignment of strategy and the change management is the toughest.
Yeah, just communication and people skills, the soft skills. What's I would say a major difference between small businesses and enterprise is when you're working with small business, it's usually the founder is the buyer, is the decision maker, is the guy writing or gal writing the check. Now, when you get to enterprise, all three of those are different positions that are C-suite level.
That would be a great case. Many times it's like each of those areas you might have a group or a committee, and they might be different committees by country, different committees by brand. So when you start to get into, we got 10 brands to go and we got 10 countries, it gets to be a little crazy.
So let's shift gears a little bit here. And this is something that you're super passionate about, is like, obviously we've been talking a lot today about direct to consumer and just the opportunity in the market and how things have kind of changed there over the past, 20 years. You're super excited about the opportunities coming to the B2B market. So quickly highlight kind of some of that opportunity that you see and what do you think people are going to be working on for the next couple of years?
Yeah, so as big as B2C is, I think the latest stats is the last running 4 quarters, we're very close to hitting $1 trillion here in the US on a B2C basis, based on the US Census Bureau. Just to give you a sense of how big, from last year, the latest numbers that are out there for B2B, the estimated amount in B2B commerce last year was like 2.6 trillion. And so it's almost 2.5 times as big. And the opportunity there, like if you look at all B2B payments, it's around 18 trillion. And so right now, if you look at that, B2B commerce plus EDI is actually one of the largest chunks. So about 50% of that is either done via EDI plus B2B. So there's a huge movement of being able to, migrate what traditionally the first iteration of being able to buy. So if you think about like, if you're at Walmart, most of their customers that they're buying and selling are transacting via EDI, which is, it's a 40-year-old, like pre-internet. They literally had their own network that you had to set up in the orders. And it was revolutionary back in the day, but now it's like higher cost to serve. And so what B2B is opening up, and especially as you're looking at opportunities, it's being able to connect. And when I talk about B2B commerce, I also include kind of marketplaces. And marketplaces, if you look at last year, they grew at a factor of 7 times the size of B2B commerce. And so there's unbelievable amount of marketplaces, more than just, obviously Amazon is killing it on the marketplace side for business, but all of these other vertical marketplaces. So for example, there's a fair.com, which helps to small DTC sellers can sell their product to different retail out to, if you look at more industrials, they're coming out with things such as chemical marketplaces where you can buy chemicals to help, mold plastics, etc., or even like how to actually serve up different products. So anyways, that's actually what's been a laggard. If you look back at the beginning of 2020, they actually had a hit because what happened was a lot of manufacturers pulled back and said, oh, we're not sure what's going to happen. And then when they understood, a few months into it, that there's going to be massive demand, chunk up, they've been catching up. And so right now, B2B is on a higher growth trajectory than B2C.
Oh yeah, that's super interesting. Now, is there anything I forgot to ask you about today that you think might resonate with our audience?
If I think about the suggestion, again, coming from some of the truths that I've seen from an e-commerce perspective, I says some things that are kind of important no matter what. I think you do a little bit of a takeaway, right? Like one, focus on your product, make it unique and understand your customer. So get your data. So if you don't have good data on your customer, look for ways to get it. And if you're looking to grow, don't ignore distribution channels such as other marketplaces. Hey, one of the things that, for example, and I know we're talking a lot about Target again, but they have a great onboarding of new brands. If you can get distribution into Target, that's amazing. But don't also ignore the marketplaces. A lot of companies sell tons on Amazon, right? But there's all these new marketplaces that are out there that are coming out from, if you look at Kroger has a massive marketplace that's grown out to, even Macy's is going to be deploying a marketplace for third-party sellers. And so there's probably about 50 to 60 major marketplaces in North America. And so you got to get creative and not just selling in one channel. Think about all the different ways that you can sell, but focus primarily on what your value add is.
Absolutely. That's amazing advice. Paul, I can't thank you for coming on the show enough. If the audience is curious, how do they get a hold of you?
I share a lot on Twitter. So DeForno P, follow me there and I can share, or hit me up on LinkedIn.
Absolutely. I'll make sure to put both of those in the show notes. Thank you so much for coming on today, Paul. All right. I can't thank our guests enough for coming on the show and sharing their knowledge and journey with us. We've got a lot to think about and potentially add into our own business. You can find all the links in the show notes. Make sure you head over to honestecommerce.co to check out all of the other amazing content that we have. Make sure you subscribe, leave a review, and obviously, if you're thinking about growing your business, check out our agency at electriceye.io. Until next time.